This is Kurt Polish with Madison ModPo, and I'm here with Jim on my left and Lou on my right, and we are going to take a look at Rae Armantraut's poem, Object. Jim is going to lead discussion.
Okay, I'd like to say a few words about her and the language poets, and then read this, and then we can get into it. Read her poems. Rae Armantraut was born in Vallejo, California in 1947, only child. And she went to San Diego State and then transferred to UC Berkeley, where she graduated. She studied with Denise Levertov. Now, the language poets were very much affected by Wittgenstein, the philosopher, and especially in his Tractatus and other works, his discussion of language games, wherein he tries to use words to get to the truth and then gets off on how language is a game and it's full of context and syntax and words don't have immutable meanings. They're part of a living process. And so it's very interesting how you can see some of that in what she did. And so it's language as a part of an activity or a form of life of its own. And so, interesting. Now, would you like me to read? Object. At a stately pace, this clump of bubbles tours the perimeter of the cup. In quotes, living systems make the most of a set of imposed constraints. As our hostage situation guest said earlier, belief systems are parodies. Glass lampstand in the shape of a bong at an upscale hotel in Berkeley. Objects that self-identify as fads and those who don't. Slender and blonde, the poplar has wandered into its present form. So, various ways to start. I'm very fascinated with the notion of language as a living system. What is the object?
Well, it's one of those words that can mean different things.
All right.
Object could mean, for instance, sentence structure, subject, verb, object. It could mean the goal, or we want to obtain, or the object of our efforts is blank. Could mean I object, as in law.
Could mean the subject, object, subject of a poem.
All right. One object is a glass lampstand in the shape of a bong in an upscale hotel in Berkeley.
All right.
Well, another object is the cup of coffee or whatever it is that begins the poem. So I see this as the poet sitting at a table or on a chair and looking into her whatever she has that she's drinking, and from there she takes off.
And where the living language stuff, the Wittgensteinian stuff, is in the quotes. Living systems make the most of a set of imposed constraints.
Is that a Wittgenstein?
I couldn't find it.
Yeah.
But it's in quotes, and I actually made some effort to find it, but it's consistent with, okay.
Resonates of.
Yeah,
sounds
which
like.
is to say that language is a living system, and the world sets constraints, and you're trying to understand or describe something for what it really is, and you discover that it's an ongoing process. You never get to truth. You never get to absolute truth.
Well,
It's an ongoing process. So I love relating that quote back to the first stanza.
well, are you suggesting the clump of bubbles towards the perimeter? The perimeter of a cup are the imposed constraints.
There you go.
And the bubbles are
Sure.
a living system of a type.
Sure.
And so she generalizes,
But
and
go ahead, Lou.
well, I was gonna say that quote is one of the most profound ideas in biology. It's,
There you go.
you know, it's,
William Carlo. Yeah.
it's sort of a statement of evolution and biologic systems all in one little quote.
Yep.
Well, also, poems do that. We think of poems that within a specific form, or postmodernists have adopted their own sets of constraints that they try to follow. And so a poem could well be a living system.
Sure.
Always, sure, always.
That's the essence of this this
Sure,
style of
absolutely.
poetry. Yeah.
And the other piece, I think, to keep in mind is that she may be looking for the energy that comes from the juxtaposition of each of these stanzas. So they may not have a direct, immediate, rational statement. Oh, I can say X is about this and Y is about this. But it may be more looking for the energy that bounces off each other.
Well, I think that it's both. I think that she's exploring the nature of this quotation and objects and with language and its limitations. The other object I was going to bring up is the poplar.
Well, and then the verb, the poplar has wandered. But go ahead with what you were.
Well, wander to me is back to the living system. And there's a tendency for us to want permanence, when in fact we live in a world that's impermanent and ever changing.
Mhm.
And if we wanted to really, an object could have the sense of being permanent. Oh, I found the truth. Oh, I found the poplar tree. But when you find a poplar tree, it's evolving,
Mhm.
even if you don't see that.
Mhm. Wandered, just sort of meandered its way into its.
Well, wandered, yeah, is it's, you know, it's a very specific word, and it means not, it wasn't directed. It had no purposeful
Mhm.
direction in it. It is because it is, and it's maybe was something else 1,000 years ago and then 500 years ago, but now it's a popular.
And don't you think this is a great play on that? The bottom of it, objects that self-identify as fads, a bong in an upscale, a lampstand in an upscale Berkeley hotel, and those that don't, poplar tree.
Yeah, that makes sense. Belief systems or parodies. As our hostage situation guest said earlier, wasn't sure what to do with that. I mean, it's a funny line.
Well, it's a living being within a clear constraint
That line, belief systems or parodies,
that we believe.
that you could write books.
Absolutely.
You could make sermons. You could,
Yes.
you know, it's an unending
Yes.
phrase because
Yes.
it's so very deep.
Yeah.
What we believe really mock us. That's
It's-
what a parody is.
Yeah.
It's kind of a joke. It's
It's
kind
a
of
joke.
a
Very well
joke
said.
on whatever it is
Yeah.
it refers to. So belief systems are jokes. That's another way
Yeah.
you could read this.
Yeah.
One of the things about language poetry that I saw an interview about Armantrout, she said, well, language poetry, some of it, we were just kids, a bunch of friends getting together. But it was more than that. It was in part a reaction to the way language was being used during the Vietnam War
Right.
by various government officials. It was just this misuse of language, and there was an attempt to save it or restore it.
Obfuscation with
Yeah.
barrages of words.
Well, you talk about the Vietnamese as the enemy or the naked aggressors, you know, not human.
Yeah.
Obviously, yes. You can't have war with people who you consider your
Yeah.
human.
And that's back to the 60s, the effect of the 60s. And, you know, she was a student at Cal right around that point. Belief systems are parodies.
She's a challenging poet too. I have taken a long time to warm up to Rae Armantraut, but
I believe that, I was listening to, I can't remember who it was the NewsHour had a poet, and this particular poet, I can't even remember her name, was saying that poetry has really come into its own recently. People are paying more attention to it. Okay, blah, blah, blah.
yeah.
I don't know if that's true or not. And then she said that you have to remember when you read poetry, that you're really exploring, as well as its form and the style, and which would be more like analyzing music, you're dealing with mystery. And so if you come away from a poem feeling like you don't get it all, that's inevitable.
Congratulations, you got it.
You got it.
That's the purpose of the poem.
There you
That's
go.
right.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's wrap that up then. Thank you, Jim.
That was fun.
Yeah.
And I'll stay away from Wittgenstein.
I wish you would have talked more about Wittgenstein.
Well, what he's saying, it's really, you know, I think he's a mathematician. He starts as a mathematician, and he wants to prove ultimately truth. And so, what is true? And of course, a lot of that will go to the sides of a triangle, things that you can prove indisputably forever. And then, but he grapples with language and its nuance and its impermanence, and eventually comes around to kind of like, as a product of this whole analysis, that really if you want to understand language, you have to understand it as a living system and a kind of game that people play in talking to one another. And I was thinking about my own experience of being in the Army and the language of the Army that way. For example, our foe in the South were called VC. That came from a Vietnamese word for Vietnamese communist. But then VC became Victor Charlie from the alphabet, then became Charles, and then became Charlie, then became Charles, then became Chuck. So you're fighting Chuck.
I've never heard of that, but
And one claim is that these language poets are very much affected by William Carlos Williams. And it seems like his poems are very different from this. But interesting to...
But it's the same. He takes objects and then
That's
builds
right.
on them.
Builds on... Yeah.
Common things, you
Yeah.
know, just
That's
short
right.
wheelbarrow.
Plus, in an Armantrout interview, she mentioned William Carlos Williams.
Mm-hmm.
And also, she warmed my heart when she said her favorite album was the Rolling Stones' Exile on Main Street.
Yeah.
And I
There you
thought,
go.
oh my gosh, this is a
There you
woman
go.
that I can relate to.